Afternoon. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat, the show trying to make the world safe for ADHD. I am a clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist. I have a private practice, and I see easily half of my practice is ADHD. At this stage of the game, I'm mostly doing evaluations, but I've had like 30 plus years working with ADHD families and ADHD kids and ADHD adults. Right now I do mostly counseling, or not counseling, coaching for ADHD executives, which is a surprisingly large number of entrepreneurs. And we will get to that sometime later. But right now we're mostly talking about families and what they need to do. I'm seriously thinking about starting to do another separate show, but I'll talk more about that later. Right now, knowing that when I started as a psychologist, I had absolutely no knowledge of ADHD. I had to get that later and on my own, by reading, by going to conferences, etc., etc. I was not trained at all in graduate school about ADHD. And that was pretty much obviously it was the case with all my classmates, but it was a sizable portion of the clinical psychologists on the planet at that time had no real knowledge of ADHD. And since then, we have come a long way. We have a lot of research. We have a lot more treatment options. Although, whoever that doc was in 1937 who first put ADHD kids on stimulant medication, we haven't really topped what he can do. We just have more different options. Anyway, so knowing that that ADHD has not always been well known, and it's still, I still get people who say, there's no such thing, that's just a bunch of crap, that's just for excusing being a bad parent or being a wussy parent so you won't discipline your kid. Trust me. Being wimpy or wussy has got nothing to do with having an ADHD kid, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with whether they're in the middle of a temper tantrum or a blowout in public. That is totally ADHD, which is a neurologic condition, which is a condition that you're born with. It's heritable. The heritability index on it is right at 85%, which is very, very high. And that means that if you have a kid with ADHD, you've got a family tree. One or both of you have a family tree that also has ADHDers, whether or not they've ever been diagnosed. A lot of times when I'm doing an evaluation, I look for, do you have family members who just barely made it through high school and now run big contracting companies, or never got successful and always were kind of bums and didn't make very much money and maybe had troubles with drugs or alcohol. Those are both, sort of keys to somebody who has ADHD and was never treated, which is why you want to treat your ADHD. But and that's the serious stuff. ADHD treatment is incredibly important for an ADHD person. I get, I don't know how many, probably 30 people a month come to the office and say, yeah, my teacher thought I had ADHD, but my mother or my dad or my parents didn't want to treat it. So now I'm late 20s, early 30s, and I am trying to get ahead, but I can't do it. I keep getting fired. I can't maintain a relationship. I try to go to school and I can't study. Those are exactly the same problems you had as a kid in school. And if you had had a treatment then, you wouldn't be coming to see me now. And you would have way more resources to get ahead, to take care of yourself, to be able to take care of a family, to know what to do when you're having another one of those senseless arguments that a lot of ADHDers have troubles with. You'd know. You'd have had the treatment. You'd have had experience dealing with it with somebody who accepts what's going on and understands that it is not a matter of fault or right or wrong or any of those other things. It's just a different way that your brain works. And so, I want to talk a little bit about at this time of year. We just went off of daylight savings time, and I talked some last time about how that can sometimes negatively affect an ADHD child, because change is not their friend. They don't like change a whole bunch, which is odd when you consider how impulsive they generally are. You would think they would love change, but typically they do not. And then you get the idea that they are not, what do I want to say here? They are not really good with change. But one of the things we know, or a lot of the things we know, is that exercise is really good for them. Golly, if you can get your kid to be a cross-country runner or a soccer player or almost anything that requires a lot of expenditure of energy, that's the secret. Frankly, if there's something that works that's not medication, it's probably exercise. And even that is not permanent, but it'll give you 3 or 4 hours of good time, which for some is sacred. We know they need exercise. We also know that being outdoors for some reason is really important to an ADHDer. Being outdoors, and the last thing we know is that they need some sort of structure. Okay? Now, a lot of times, winter, especially the further north you live, winter is a problematic time. A lot of times you find winter is when, I remember when I was living in North Dakota, the joke was every summer everybody dried out, went to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and were sober for all summer. And then the winter hit, which in North Dakota the winters are long and harsh, and daylight is limited. You're lucky if you get 4 hours of daylight out of 24. And the joke was that then everybody started drinking again, and the AA meetings were empty. I don't know if that's really funny, but they seem to think it was. But the deal is, some people tend to try to hibernate in the winter, especially if it's 20 degrees or less outside and the snow's falling and da-da-da-da-da. It is important that for your ADHD child, in spite of how cold it is or that sort of thing, is that they get some exercise. And if that's go to the gym and play basketball, fine, but they need exercise. If it's going out for a hike in the woods or going cross-country skiing, beautiful. You're knocked out 2 birds with 1 stone. People tend, especially in this day and age when almost all families are dual career, you get the weekend as being the time to catch up on stuff. I got to do laundry, I got to do the grocery shopping, I got to cook for next week, or however you do it. We know that weekend time sometimes is pretty stressed. And sometimes for some people it's because the kids have got so many activities. If that's the case, then you don't need what I'm talking about right now. But if your tendency is to everybody stays indoors all weekend and then peaks out on Monday morning, that's going to be a problem for your ADHD child, okay? Your ADHD child needs to be out, needs to be exercising, and there needs to be a certain amount of organization or structure around an ADHD child. Surprisingly, a lot of ADHD, well, maybe it's not surprising, but a lot of ADHD kids, as they become adults, do really well in the military, which I can see that. I mean, it's a very structured kind of thing. You're told to do something by somebody who's going to check on you regularly to make sure you did it. And that's kind of the optimal way to get a performance out of an ADHD person. But if you are so busy on the weekends that you don't have time to structure your kid's life or your kid's behavior, okay, but you're going to have some troubles. Okay, so you've got to have enough organization that they know they got to be doing something. Because I know what happens a lot of times. Video games. Okay, and I'm not against video games. I mean, my lord. Colleges are starting to have e-teams where they give scholarships to people who are on the team. And they have competitions with other colleges. And playing the video games, you can make a living. You can, go into contests and all that stuff. Okay, but which is, for me, this is like, my God, like getting paid money to play checkers or something. I just don't have a good concept of that. But you lose something if your kiddo is always playing video games. If he's not at the table or he's not doing homework, he's in his bedroom playing video games, or she. There are problems with that. Social skills are probably the scariest thing that most of us have to face. Guys, you have to, especially when you get a certain age, you're supposed to ask girls out on dates. And there's nothing harder than that. Doing a 10-minute presentation in class in front of your friends is nothing compared to the first time you ask a girl out. Or as a young lady, how do you handle that? That's the first time that's ever happened to you. Woo! Okay, feel the power. That's what it really is, a powerful time for a teenage girl. But you have to understand that if you don't put yourself in situations where you have to do things that involve social communication, including public speaking, your social development is retarded. Okay, it doesn't develop, and it's important that you have a well-developed social sense and well-developed social skills and well-developed ability to deal with people in social settings. And if your idea of social is the voice of your friend from down the street in your headphone while you're playing some video game or other, that's not quite good enough. Okay, so parents, but a lot of times, and I know this for a fact from the people who have come into my office still, the tendency is to use video games as a babysitter. Because one of the nice things is, when they're playing video games, they're not into anything, they're not making noise, they are not doing all the things that are irritating and cause you to yell and scream and jump up and down, okay? But you've got to limit that. You've got to make sure that they aren't, doing that some absurd amount of hours a day. And you want to make sure that that isn't their only social interaction. They need to have some kind of activity, a sport, or shoot, even skateboarding is better than sitting on your fanny playing video games 24/7. So you and you have got to set yourself up some time so that you can help them with this organization, with this structure. So you're not just, oh, thank God he's playing video games, now I can get something done. That can't be the way you handle it with your child, and that can't be the way you that can't be the way you babysit him, because it's going to cause you long-term difficulties. All right, that is the thing about winter, and it's like I say, it's worse in the further north you get, because the winters are fierce, and sometimes you have snowstorms that last several days or blizzards. The days are much shorter. You have much less daylight and that sort of thing, and the temperatures are much harsher. But some of my favorite memories from growing up in New England are being outdoors skiing, and it was obviously pretty cold, or being outdoors playing hockey on the local pond, and it was cold, and we still did it because we were young and bulletproof and invulnerable. So it's more important that you're active. It's more important that you're outdoors than almost anything else. And when they go home, there's enough structure that they're not always gaming and involved in nothing that's a little more positive, at least from a social perspective. Okay, that is me for this week. The problems we're going to have some changes in the not too distant future, but I'll talk about those a little bit more when I'm sure exactly what I'm doing. But for right now, I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass. This is Dr. G's ADHD Chat, the show for making the world safe for ADHD kids. And as I always say, big changes in the world are caused by people who think outside the box. And who knows, your child may be the one that solves all kinds of our biggest problems, such as global warming or whatever. So, cherish that kid, okay? And your job is to help them grow up, to be responsible and have a good sense of self-respect, and to be persistent or resilient, as the more proper term or more popular term is now. Okay, you can make comments around below somewhere around this thing, and also my website is terrygingrassphd.com. Okay, we will catch you next week.